Hello everybody and welcome to the stream. Of course, as soon as I have a schedule again, I completely fuck it up. Had to happen. I was too late a bit late for the show yesterday anyway, but I was gonna record it and then something happened and I couldn't. Some emergency came up and I just couldn't do it. I'm very sorry about that. So we'll have to do it today. So I'm a day late. Oh damn, that was the wrong button. I'm a day late and $1 short, but I'm gonna record this show anyway. How are you? How are you doing? So as I mentioned, I have a schedule again. Let's see if this command works. Oh yeah. So I'm gonna play The Witcher tomorrow. I'm gonna tomorrow. What did I say? Is it 2 p.m.? I think. No, it's at 12. It's noon. Wow, that's early. I planned that early. Well, I hope I'll be ready by then. But I want to get back to The Witcher 2. I could be a bit late there now as well because everything's of course pushed back now. Because I have to do this podcast today and I have to do other stuff I have to do today. It's Anyway, I'm gonna stop complaining. How are you doing? I just made myself some fresh coffee. I got everything prepared yesterday, so that's good. So get that going. I had the show notes ready. Just had to do some other work this morning before I started this. Let's start recording. Let's try this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That looks good. Astral, how are you doing? Good afternoon. Yeah, I guess it is afternoon. I feel like it's still morning. Let's try this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, looks like we are ready to do this. Of course, podcast ground rules apply. Alerts are muted, etc. PP. I can't even drink. Can't even drink coffee and what is going on? Everything's going to shit. Right, I'm gonna try to do this show anyway. Hopefully you can't see the. Yeah, you can. That's the beauty of a black shirt. You can see the coffee stains. Right. I think I'll jump right into it before anything else goes wrong, and we'll take it from there. I'm trying to do this, get this done now, so I can do the other stuff. I also have another podcast to record today, which I'm not gonna live stream that, but if you're interested in that, go to escapethetalk.show, and the episode should turn up there as well, like tomorrow or something. I don't know when I can get it done. Anyway, let's get this show. Let's get this show on the road. Here we go. Let's see if I can remember how this goes. You're listening to The Private Citizen, a podcast where we're trying to think for ourselves, look at sources directly, and analyze the world instead of just believing what we are told. This is episode 80 for Thursday, the 5th of August, 2021. Biden's dangerous cyber jingoism. Hello everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Fab, I'm your host. I'm coming to you live from Düsseldorf in Germany, where I'm a day late. at $1 short. I don't know. Am I $1 short? I have no idea. Yes, I had everything prepped to release the show yesterday on Wednesday, as I usually do, and as I kind of promised I would do. But then, I was too late as things were stacking up, but I was kind of ready to do it, and then something else happened. I had a kind of an emergency going on that I just couldn't do the show last night. So, it's now Thursday, day late, but it's the same content. And if you're listening, to this as a podcast, you're probably not sitting there on Thursday morning. Maybe you are. Maybe that's your commute ritual. If I've destroyed that, I'm sorry. I remember when I had, commutes. I certainly had these rituals where I listened to certain podcasts on certain days, and I kind of waited for them. So if I messed that up for you, I'm terribly sorry about that. If you are watching this live on Twitch, which is something that happens, I stream the recording live, then this is this is very different. It's not Wednesday afternoon. It's kind of like, it's kind of the afternoon, but it's early in the afternoon on Thursday. Anyway, let's do the show. Let's stop with this. I was going to say, let's stop with this housekeeping bullshit. But there's some more housekeeping bullshit. I have to mention, next week on Tuesday, I'm scheduled. I hope it'll happen. I'll get my second shot for my SARS-CoV-2 vaccination. As you might remember from a previous show, I reacted very strongly to my first shot. Now, I was scheduled to get a second AstraZeneca shot, but they changed that around because apparently now it's better if you get another brand of vaccine for your second shot. So I'm now getting the BioNTech one, which means I'll be completely genetically modified. Not only will they have injected me with DNA, I'm getting RNA now too. I'm getting everything. But I'm kind of, I don't know, with the AstraZeneca, it's kind of like you get, people reported that you get a lot of if you get side effects, you get them with the first shot, then the second shot, really, you don't get any. But now that I get a different one, I'm kind of expecting that I'll react to it again. I don't know. I haven't read any. Couldn't find any reports of people getting this combination and what happened to them, really. So I don't know. But I'm expecting to get knocked out again next week. So and my schedule is full and really all over the place now with that thing happening yesterday. So I don't really know how I don't know if I'm going to do a show on Monday next week. That's what I did last time to get the show out ahead, because I was expecting side effects and I had 4 days of side effects. I'm very happy I could get that done. If I can get that done next week again, I will certainly do that. But if there won't be a show next week until Saturday or Sunday or not at all, and I'll be back the week after, you know what happened. It had probably knocked me out again for 2 days, and I just work kept piling up. But maybe nothing will happen. Maybe I'll be back on Wednesday. I just wanted to let you know, give you fair warning, heads up. It's all very exciting times we're living in, so who knows? It's not good for plans. These last 2 years have not been good for fulfilling plans you have made, I feel. Anyway, let's get into the show. Today we're going to talk. We talked about Cyberwar a lot. Of course, I'm a journalist writing a lot about IT security, so I'm interested in this whole Cyberwar stuff. And I gave you my lowdown a few episodes back what I think about Cyberwar, and I thought it's probably going to get worse with the rhetoric. And exactly that has happened, because last week or 2 weeks ago, I think when I was on holiday, Joe Biden gave a speech. So the US president gave a speech, and he was basically ramping up the whole rhetoric on Cyberwar. So I think we'll have to address that. Okay, Terrestrious Jim says, hello Jim, in Twitch chat, people I know who had this combination were sick for a week. Hope you do cope better. Well, from my last experience, but I don't know how it works. We know so little about these vaccines, so it could be that because I reacted so strongly the first time, it'll be okay the second time. Maybe I'll get knocked out for a week. So if you don't hear from me, Expect that. That is probably what will have happened. Anyway, let's get into the show here. Let's talk about Joe Biden and cyber. Joe Biden, cyber. Yeah, the cyber. We got to talk about the cyber. So, episode 60, if you haven't listened to that, it's probably worth going back and listening to that before you listen to this episode, because this episode's going to build on that. Episode 60 was basically me talking about the term cyberwar because everybody keeps bringing it up, and I kind of think it's bullshit. So I gave you a short history of, like, in that episode, I gave you like a short history of, like, you know, viruses, Trojans, hacker attacks. And then the term cyberwar, which at one point cropped up, and I also kind of explained why I think it's a bad name. I think it's a misnomer. And I kind of explained in that episode why, because basically cyberwar. I mean, part of the term. I mean, the two term. It's a term made out of two words, and both are shit. Like, cyber is shit because if you're my age, if you're like an very old millennial, borderline Gen Xer, then cyber to you means cyber sex, because that's what we called it in the 90s. You know, you want a cyber, you know, ICQ, that kind of shit. So that's like just a bad term. And then the other part of it is war. And there's a crucial difference between actual war and cyber war, which I explained in that episode. But even while I said this, I explained all of this. I said, we're not going to get rid of that term. It's a very, very popular propaganda term that it's especially been used a lot by the U.S. government, and it's just like something that's going to crop up again and again. And I mean, this is initially, of course, calling things cyber war and basically using this as a foreign policy tool to threaten other countries. Was kind of pioneered by the U.S. and usually towards Russia, but also, in the beginning, a lot towards North Korea. If you remember the Sony Pictures hack, for example. And it's happened for a while. I mean, this happened under Obama, to a lesser degree under Trump, although Trump certainly used it as well, because it's just a part of U.S. foreign policy now. But, you could see, like, from the beginning of this year when Biden assumed the presidency, it just ramped up a lot. And he's now taking the next step. So what has happened? Joe Biden gave a speech, and I'm reading this from a Financial Times article. So they kind of shortened this a little bit. So they sum it up this way. Joe Biden has warned that cyber attacks could escalate into a full-blown war as tensions with Russia and China mounted over a series of hacking incidents targeting U.S. government agencies, companies, and infrastructure. Biden said on Tuesday, so this is like, I don't know, when was this? Like 2 weeks ago or something. Biden said on Tuesday that cyber threats, including ransomware attacks, quote, increasingly are able to cause damage and disruption in the real world. If we end up in a war, a real shooting war with a major power, it's going to be as a consequence of a cyber breach, end quote. The president said in a speech at the Office for the Director of National Intelligence, which oversees 18 U.S. intelligence agencies. And you can kind of tell by the venue what this is, right? But I'm going to get into that later. A number of recent hacks revealed the extent of U.S. cyber vulnerability, ranging from extensive espionage breaches that have struck at the heart of government to ransomware attacks that have brought operations at an important oil pipeline and meatpacking plants to a halt. The Biden administration has accused the governments of Russia and China, or hackers based inside the two countries, of some of the attacks. U.S. officials have warned that the administration would respond with a, quote, mix of tools seen and unseen, unquote, actions, but cyber breaches have continued. Although he did not say who such a war might be fought against, Biden immediately name-checked Russia's President Vladimir Putin, alleging that Russia was spreading misinformation ahead of the 2022 U.S. midterm elections. Quote, it's a pure violation of our sovereignty, end quote, he said. It is interesting, by the way, So I'm guessing we're talking about the Facebook ads and all that kind of stuff that we talked about on the show as well when we talk about election and election manipulation. Now, interesting that he calls that a violation of sovereignty, because of course, I mean that is the point about cyberspace, if you want to call it, right? It's not in the country. This is why this cannot be a violation of sovereignty, right? It's kind of like, I guess they're kind of equating it to like the equivalent would be, okay, if you're talking like, World War II kind of era, if you flew with a plane, or let's say, Vietnam or whatever, like you flew with a plane over a country and you dropped like these leaflets, right, with propaganda, you could call that violation of sovereignty, I guess. So I guess that's where they're taking that from. It's a bit weird, though, I feel. It's... I think what policymakers and also often law enforcement is grappling with here is that really the internet is global, right? And is not in a country. I mean, the internet is a particular server might be in a country, but like when you're talking, for example, Facebook, right? You're talking basically a website that is spread over infrastructure all over the world. So if I access Facebook from here, where I am in Germany, I'm probably going to access servers in the EU. I mean, there might be in Germany, but most likely are probably in Ireland or something. And so, like, from my perspective, is Facebook in my country? Is it in the EU? It's a website operated by a US company that is headquartered in the US, but I'm certainly probably not accessing US servers all the time. Sometimes you don't really know, right? And that's what laws grapple with a lot. I feel like there's a topic in this. I don't want to go deeper into this, but I feel like there's a topic here at some point talking about like how law struggles with this extra territorial nature of the internet. And of the digital world. Let's call it that. That sounds better than cyberspace. Which is an important point when you're talking about cyberwar, because cyberwar, I'm just going to use that term unironically, although it's going to be a bit ironic. This term's terrible, but I explain that. I'm just going to use it because everybody calls it that. But like I cringe every time I say it. That's the whole point, right? It's not a... so you could like, if you're Russia, right, and if you're attacking the US, you could have people physically fly them over to China, like set up an operations center in China, and have it attack US servers, like US government servers or company servers from China, right? You can't really... If you're in the war, like you can't really drive your artillery over to China and then shoot from China to the US. You know what I mean? Like you kind of that doesn't really work. There's physicality involved, whereas on the internet there isn't, which is exactly why these tactics are being used. I mean, I talked about this in the first episode. It's hard to attribute attacks, and you can physically launch them from another country. Right? Is China at fault at that point? Is it Russia because they're Russian operatives? Then you'll have to prove that they're like it's all a huge gray area, right? Which is like war historically. Speaking as somebody who's went to university to study history for quite a while. Historically, war is inherently local, right? It's it can be global, but it's like it's not a gray area. It is historically you declare war, and then that kind of went away. But you had like if you're talking World War II, right, where the onset of World War II really wasn't declared. Like the German invasion of Poland was not. I mean, there was a war declaration later, but it wasn't like the old way of doing things. But there's like at the point where your tanks or your infantry crosses the border, you've opened hostilities and there's a war on. Within the internet, within cyberspace, and cyberwar, like what? There's no declaration of war. There's no one action you can point to, and we what's interesting is that this weaves together, because we're getting this kind of thinking kind of infiltrated real war as well. If you think about the Crimean conflict, we're basically, I mean, this is still all. From a historical standpoint, the jury is still very much out on this. If you're talking historians, where you're looking at things at the earliest 30 years later. But let's go with the working theory that Russia invaded Crimea to annex it, but did so in a way that didn't use its nominal armed forces, right? Where they used like old weapons and gave them to like militia groups within Ukraine. They probably brought soldiers over, but not in uniform. They stripped their insignia and everything. So it was kind of like a clandestine war. I mean, that is not new. Guerrilla warfare and that kind of thing has existed for hundreds of years. But it is. It's a new quality. It is something new when like superpowers do that. Even in the Cold War, where we had all these different proxy wars, it wasn't that the Soviet Union did not deny it was supporting other communist countries around the world against what they used to call U.S. aggression or imperialism. Right, the Soviet Union would not have sent soldiers without insignia to some country and then claimed it didn't. This is something new, and it's very interesting, and it goes together well with what we're talking about here with Cyberwar. But anyway, let's finish this FT article. At a June summit in Geneva, Biden personally warned Putin. President Putin, but okay, they also just called him Biden. Biden personally warned Putin that the U.S. would, quote, respond with cyber, end quote. That's a typical Biden. We'll respond with cyber. All right. If I'm Putin's like, okay, are you like, what are we exchanging? Dirty text messages? What are you saying? That the U.S. would, quote, respond with cyber if the Russian state or Russian-based hackers targeted U.S. infrastructure. The prohibited sectors spanned energy, healthcare, IT, and commercial facilities, all of which have already allegedly been targeted by Russian hackers since the 2020 US elections. Others included transport, financial services, and chemicals. Biden stressed that cyber attacks were just one aspect of the growing threats facing the US, saying that there would be more developments in the next 10 years than in the past 50, placing a tremendous burden on the intelligence community. Quote, it's really going to get tougher, end quote, he said. I just love, Biden's, it's the way he talks. It's really going to get tougher. This boy has got a plan. What? But there you can see, I mean, he, this article without, it's not journalism like I would have done it, but they kind of raise the issues. They don't go into it, but the FT says here, if the Russian state or Russian-based hackers, right, then if they target the US, then the US will, quote, respond with cyber. Now, that's, if you're thinking foreign policy, this is a whole different level. I mean, yes, okay, I understand the argument that if you're going, okay, these are state-sponsored hackers, they're attacking us, and we're going to react to that. I mean, we could have an argument how you should react to that, but, if you're the US and you're gung-ho, military, whatever, then you're we're hacking, we're going to hack them back. That's all right. I mean, I understand that. If you're saying, okay, they're state-sponsored. But if you're saying they're just hackers within Russia, I mean, that is just... This could be like some script kiddie guy somewhere in Novosibirsk who's like really bored and goes and hacks like the DoD computer system, whatever, right? And then there's an attack on U.S. military, and with what Biden is saying that we're basically threatening war, then we'll have war, right? That is like in old school like IRL terms, that would be like a Russian citizen going over the US and blowing up a building, like a civilian, right? A terrorist. And you then saying, okay, this is a declaration of war by the government of, or by the country of Russia, and we're going to invade them now. Again, one can see parallels. The US started this kind of thinking with the war on terror, right, where you had non-state actors, terrorists, blowing up the World Trade Center, which was used by the U.S. and by the government and by forces within the government to start war, the longest war in U.S. history, a horrible war, which was already new back then. This was like, okay, I was in. We didn't talk about this in history, of course, because I just went to university shortly after that, but. Like already in politics, that was like a topic we discussed in university, where this is that's kind of a new quality, right? Because you're basically shifting the blame from a terrorist group that is not necessarily like directly supported by a government of a country to the country, and then you're attacking the country, including civilians in the country and its actual military. And I always thought that was a dumb move to do. It's kind of like this war on terror thing. It's kind of like, it seems to be a modus operandi of like the US foreign policy. I mean, the name back then was silly as well. War on terror was an idiotic name, or is an idiotic name. It's an idiotic concept because it is not like you can have a war against a country. You can even have a war against a terrorist group. But war on terror means you're having a war against a concept, a theoretical concept. And that is by definition open-ended war. And a excuse to basically fight anybody you want. You can just say they're terrorists and we're on a war on terror, and so we're going to fight them. That I always thought that was a very dangerous thing, but it seems since then to have been entrenched in like kind of like the U.S. Or like U.S. policymakers thinking as the new way to go about things. I feel, which is a bit dangerous. I think. I mean, I mean. It leaves you free to basically declare war at any time, right? If you say that, okay, we have been attacked by somebody in the country and now that country is responsible and now we're attacking them, then you're basically free to declare war at any time. And we know historically how bad that was, right? If you want a similar situation, completely different historical context, but a very similar situation would be the outbreak of World War I, where basically the German Empire gave the Austrian Empire a carte blanche and said, we are in an alliance with you. If something happens to you, and if you declare war, then we're down for it, right? Which gave the Austrians the power to just basically start a world war. They're with a very powerful ally. Something they could have never done alone. And that is something that usually isn't done in foreign policy. If you think before World War I, especially in Europe, there was always a very, very, very detailed and very complex system of alliances in place, right? I did a lot of studies about Bismarck, who was a master at this kind of thing. And you had very different alliances, like you have defensive alliances, just play something like, a computer game like Crusader Kings, and you'll understand all the different nuances of that, right? Where you only attack if your partners attack, like the country you're in alliance with. You could have, you actually, you can have defensive alliance, but you can also have like an offensive. I don't know, that's the wrong. I just can't remember the term. But basically, where if the country goes to war, you go to war as well. But you don't give them like a carte blanche like the Germans did to the Austrians at the onset of World War I. Usually you limit that somehow, right? Usually there has to be a casus belli, and these have to be like restricted, right? You can't just go, whenever you feel like go to war, we'll help you out. I mean, that certainly has happened before, but it's a very dangerous thing. And I kind of have the same feeling with this kind of war on terror stuff, or this the stuff Biden has said here. This is worrying me a lot. But I think we have to go. So I have a link to the transcript of this actual speech that Biden gave, if you want to read it, which is certainly in the mindset of this podcast. Read the sources, think about them for yourself. Don't just believe me or anybody else. So if you go to privatecitizen.press, there is a link to everything I talk about, including this transcript of the speech. Now I'm going to read out the very short passage that is actually the interesting part that this news article was about. So Biden says, and this is typical Biden like dictum. It's like it's really funny. Biden says, we've seen how cyber threats, including ransomware attacks, increasingly are able to cause damage and disruption to the real world. I can't guarantee this, and you're as informed as I am, but I think it's more likely we're going to end up, if we end up in a war, a real shooting war with a major power, it's going to be as a consequence of a cyber breach of great consequence. And it's increasing exponentially, the capabilities. It's typical Biden. You're as informed as I am. Well, I hope not. I hope the US president is more informed than anybody he's talking to, including the intelligence community. But okay. I don't know. So what he's basically saying here is that if a war is coming involving the US, an actual war, then it's more likely that this war will be caused and by a hacker attack or a data breach, which, cyber, as he likes to call it, and not because, as traditionally would be, by violation of territory, a nuclear launch or like the assassination of like an important leader, military leader, a president of a country or something. Just to be clear what he's talking about here, we're talking about like, if he says a real shooting war, we're presumably talking World War III here, right? Because we are talking the US versus another superpower, Russia, China. That would probably cause World War III. And so Biden is saying that that a data breach could cause, and he thinks very likely is going to cause World War III. Basically, I'm assuming the World War III part, but a serious war. Which is, to me, is insane. Saying this is insane. Because if you look at the attacks that we've seen and what they have caused, as Biden said, the damage they have caused, the disruption and damage they have caused in the real world, it's laughable. Right? Yeah, sure. Somebody shut a pipeline down, which, shitty design. This was one pipeline that was, the problem there was not that the pipeline was hacked. The problem was that the pipeline basically supplies a quarter of the United States with gas, right? And this pipeline shut down before for technical problems. Same problem, right? Some people don't have gas. Maybe it's not like people died, right? Even the worst case scenario, somebody shuts down the power grid. people are not going to die. And if they die, it's not because of the hacker attack, but because of incompetence somewhere, right? Every hospital needs to have emergency power, right? If the power grid goes down for whatever reason, it doesn't have to be a hacker attack 20 years ago or 30 years ago. I mean, a transformer can explode somewhere, and then you have a chain reaction, and like lots of transformers explode, the power grid goes down. You need emergency power if you're in a hospital and you have an operating room, right? And you're doing a heart surgery on somebody for 24 hours. You need fucking emergency power. Like, and hospitals generally have that. I mean, the hospital my wife used to work at in Hamburg has an actual power plant. You know, they don't have diesel generator. They have an actual, like, they produce their own power and heat. And of course, they have backup systems for that as well. I mean, yes, there's always this, ever since I've been writing about IT security, there's the idea, oh, they're going to hack the power grid, and then the nuclear power plant's going to melt down, right? And I've looked into this extensively, and, well, theoretically, yes, that could happen. Of course. But, you know, unsurprisingly, these computers that operate the power plant are not connected to the internet. Yes, you can bridge that. I mean, you know, we had this attack on the, you know, the Iranian, you know, uranium centrifuges and stuff like that. You can do that, right? But, like, in my estimation, it's not more likely than a power plant just melting down because a nuclear power plant melting down because of a you know, human error or like a failure in equipment. Usually these things are supposed to be built in a way that, you know, when something goes wrong, they safely shut themselves down. So, but even if you imagine a scenario where like a hacker could attack a country and could hurt the infrastructure in such a way that people would actually die. Right? Even in a, like, you know, take the most shittiest, like, Hollywood scenario. Was it like Die Hard 4, where they switch, like, the traffic lights, and then all the cars run into each other because people wouldn't, like, immediately realize if the traffic light just goes, like, if it goes green on all parts of the intersection, you just drive. Hey, the traffic light's green. Like, everybody else, no, you just drive, and everybody would kill each other. That's how it happens, right? Right? Even if you imagine some of that would be like hundreds of deaths, maybe. That would be like the worst case scenario. But we're talking what Biden is saying here is like something like this happens and then we go to war with Russia, which could presumably cause a nuclear war. And even if it doesn't do that, even if they somehow manage to contain it where it's just a conventional war, you're talking like aircraft carriers, bombardments, tanks, people shooting at each other, civilians getting killed, right? We're talking like even the smallest, most contained war is like thousands of casualties. So it's just like, I understand the rhetoric when you go like, okay, they hacked us, we're going to hack them back. They hurt us, we're going to hurt them back. I'm not a friend of that, but like that is at least sane. Saying they hacked us, we're going to go to war is insane. I personally think that's insane. Like, if you think it through, and I know Joe Biden can't, you know, I don't think he can do that. I don't think he has the mental capacity anymore. But I think, to me, I think he's kind of like a mouthpiece, right? Like, just listen to that speech or any other speech he's giving. Like, just listen to him, like, read out a speech from a teleprompter. It's, I mean, it's, to me, it's quite kind of obvious. But, like, I'm not even blaming Joe Biden because I'm thinking he's not completely there. I think he's just a mouthpiece. The problem is that there's somebody behind him, somebody there in the, for lack of a better, I personally think it's like, you know, entrenched neocons in the US government that have been there, the same people that been there under Bush, that been there under Obama, that probably been there under Trump, but Trump with his like chaotic style of government, I think kind of managed to contain them. but maybe not. I don't know. But like they're certainly back with Biden. And I think Biden is just saying what they want him to say, right? They decided that somehow, somewhere behind closed doors. I'm talking the DOD, maybe like what they in the media always call the quote intelligence community, which is a terrible word. Spies, fucking people who lie for a living, the kind of guys Snowden warned us about, who nonetheless get like spots on CNN, analyst spots on CNN or whatever. So these kind of guys, they're basically putting out the message to Putin, or I'm just going to say it's like the Russian government, maybe the Chinese government, you're kind of hacking us. We are serious about this. We're going to go to war. And that's just like, as I said, I think that's insane. We're talking like destroyed equipment here, right? We're talking wasted money, destroyed resources, and you want to go to war, as Biden cutesy kind of says it, a real shooting war, right? And just look at the most minimal like wars the US has fought. Like so I always remember. So this is kind of the first war I really like. Okay, there was like the second Gulf War, at the beginning of the 90s. I was too young. I was growing up when that happened, but I saw like the news reports and stuff. Didn't really understand it. The first war I really understood because I was old enough was, the war in the Kosovo. And that's kind of like the most limited, I think, in my lifetime, or what I can think of that the US has ever gone to war. Where you basically park a few aircraft carriers somewhere and then just, shoot from ships and have planes, take out their air defenses and then control the skies and like rain bombs down on them. And for, there was very limited ground, US ground forces involved there. So for the US, it was a very hands-off war. But talk to somebody from former Yugoslavia, like what that war looked like for them, and how many civilians died, and what kind of infrastructure was destroyed in the bombardment. And if you just take that as like the minimum case of something the US would do to retaliate against the cyber attack, just imagine that. Just imagine a country. Just don't even think Russia. Let's forget about World War III. Let's forget about nuclear war. Let's take a country that doesn't have nuclear weapons, right? And that country goes and says, okay, we're going to hack the US. And then the US goes, okay, in response, we're going to park a couple of aircraft carriers off your shore and then just start bombing your civilian centers. Like, I mean, like, why? So the thing I can't understand. So I can understand the US president saying something like this, even like of their politicians. They're going to say something like this. Why is there no commentary in the press about this? What this means? The Financial Times, CNN, everybody, New York Times, they just go, yeah, Cyberwar, we're going to retaliate. Biden said it's going to be a real shooting war. Like, why does nobody even contrast what we're talking about when we're talking Cyberwar and when we're talking shooting war? Like, what the actual differences are. It's a hell of a big difference if somebody goes and puts ransomware in your computer and you can't use your fucking computer, right? Which only hurts you when you didn't have backups. Okay, that's everybody, but still, right? You could have actually protected against that. And somebody bombing your house to shit, to pieces, to rubble. Like rubbleizing your street, as No Agenda says, rubbleizing your street. Like, just, like, that, why? I mean, I didn't see a single article somewhere in a big newspaper on an internet site. I didn't see anything on TV where somebody said, listen, this is what we're talking about here. This is what he's talking about when he says a shooting war. And they said Donald Trump was bad. Trump never did. I mean, he did a lot of shit. He's an asshole, but he never gave speeches like this. Like, this is incredible. I mean, you kind of ask yourself, haven't they learned from history? And, Biden should have known, because Biden has been a politician so long. He was around when Vietnam was going on. And he's been around for the whole Afghanistan war, which is now the longest war in U.S. history. It's been a disaster. It's kind of like Vietnam was, just like longer. Okay, a bit more contained as well, and not so like traumatic for the U.S. population. But just ask those. There are very good documentaries with high-ranking U.S. military officials who were in Afghanistan. Like I've seen one. I can't remember. This is like 2 years ago or something. It's like one guy who was the U.S. military commander in Afghanistan for like 4 years or whatever. And when he came back, he delivered a like kind of a report to Congress, and I think he was pissed off. I think this was still under Obama, and he was really pissed off how they basically tried to put it under the carpet. But just look at this. There's enough material out there of these U.S. high-ranking military officials just talking about what a disaster that war was and still is, right? And that's one of the things that always cracked me up about Trump. When Trump was the first U.S. president who said, we're going to stop this, we're going to pull these people out of there. And suddenly the press goes, oh, you can't do that, it's going to descend on chaos. Like, what the fuck? You've been calling for almost 20 years to get the people out, to get your soldiers back home. And now the U.S. president does that, and suddenly he's like, or tries to do it, and suddenly he's like the evil guy? I've never understood this. I mean, you'd think Biden should know. He's been around long enough, but I don't think I don't think he's paying attention. He's not there anymore. I don't understand. And of course, journalists are not much better. As I said, they don't point out something like this. They don't point out in their articles what the difference between so-called cyberwar and why that is even a dumb description. Listen to episode 60. Private citizen or press, it's all on there. There's a tag if you go to tags at the top of the show notes, there's like a Cyberwar tag, right? You can click on that, and then you'll get all the episodes where I talked about Cyberwar. So if you want more about this topic, but it's like, nobody's talking about that now. The one take I read about this, and I have a link in the show notes to my my ex-colleagues at Heise who kind of had the same point, but it's like that's just an article I read, so I linked it. It's also in German. I was preparing the show notes. There's stuff in English about this. I just couldn't find anything off the top of my head. My fault. I didn't bookmark them when I read them, but basically lots of journalists had the same take. They kind of justify this, what I think is jingoism by Biden, as like an attempt to just try and deter other countries from from perpetuating these kind of like cyber attacks, if you want to call them that. Which, for some countries, that is undeniable, are now part of like their offensive foreign policy. I'm not denying that this is what Russia is doing. I think that is what they're doing. I also think that's what China is doing. It is a part of their arsenal now, right? It's not war. It's a thing you can do between in your foreign policy arsenal. You can spy on people, you can sabotage them, you can go to war, you can manipulate other countries, and there's just you now have clandestine hacker attacks. You can do that, and I think they're doing that. I don't want to deny that. Just to point that out, I don't think I'm not trying to belittle these kind of attacks. I think they hurt people, they hurt infrastructure, they hurt countries. I'm just trying to explain, what the difference between that and actual war is. And I'm not trying to deny that this stuff is happening. So Astral in Twitch chat says Biden's showing a cyber dick to make the cyber Cold War happen. I don't think he's actually doing that. Because he's kind of threatening. He's kind of trying to shut it down, right? He's not happy with it going on for whatever reason. I think my personal theory, and this is like completely of what I think, is that they're just not as good. The Russians are very, very good at this. They're very adept at the offensive part of it. I think the US for the last 20 years since September 11 has looked inside a lot. And I think if you go from what Snowden revealed, a lot of the intelligence agencies, especially the ones dealing with technology and the internet, have put a lot of effort on actually spying on Americans on American soil to prevent like terror attacks. So I don't think they developed their offensive arsenal as the Russians did, and now they're kind of like flat-footed. And I think that's why he's trying to shut it down. Jonathan says, this all seems very on brand, though. Some live feedback here from Twitch, which is cool. Posturing and threatening for the superpower sets. Yeah, that's what I basically meant with this is the neocons, right? This is on brand for what the US has been doing for decades, or these forces in government. Now, but going back to what journalists are basically saying, what he's doing here. So the idea would be that Biden is doing this, he's threatening because he's trying to deter other countries from doing this. Now, I think this is dumb. Coming to this conclusion is dumb, and I'm going to explain why. I think this doesn't make any sense, and it completely misses why these attacks are happening, which is something I explained in a previous episode. So the reason you do, let's call it cyberwar. The reason you do that is because it's explicitly not war. And it has plausible deniability, right? If you fire a rocket, if you send a tank over the border, even what the Russians did in Crimea, right? You can, people like Bellingcat and what, you can kind of show that this is an old Russian tank, whatever, where it came from. What you can show that. With hacker attacks, that is a lot harder. Because, as I also explained before, attribution is very hard. Attribution of these attacks is very hard. Sometimes it's almost impossible. And basically what you can do is you can use this as a foreign policy tool to attack other countries without actually the risk of causing war, which is what the Russians are doing. The Russians don't want a war, right? The Russians wanted Crimea, but they didn't want to have an open war with Ukraine. And in the same way, they don't want to have a war with the US. So they're using tools where they can hurt the US, chiefly the economy, without causing war, right? Now, because the technical attribution of these attacks is so hard, and because it takes time, it takes a lot of work and time, and in most cases it takes months to actually attribute these attacks correctly, if you even can. And so far, I don't know of a single case, and I'm writing about this professionally, I don't know about a single case where actually a government has waited. So an attack happened, and the government has waited until they had actual technical attribution. Usually you have attribution, which I call political attribution, on the same day or a day later, right? When the German Bundestag, the German parliament, was hacked on the same day, they said it was the Russians. And this is the same in the US. So in most cases, this attribution is purely political, and it's just done for cynical political means, right? You wanna stick it to your rivals, right? If they attacked you or not, doesn't have anything to do with this. It could be true, but like at that point, you technically don't know. In some cases, I've mentioned here the attack on the German parliament in 2015. It turns out, we learned years later that actually they knew, they had very plausible actually intelligence sources. So they had like human intelligence, people apparently close to Putin who reported that he ordered this attack. But the thing is, that is not like, you can't verify that, even if that's like even today. I wrote about the story originally. There's a link to a CT article I wrote about this in 2015 in the show notes, privatecitizen.press. Even if that's believable, even today you can't verify that, because like it's intelligence sources, right? All of this is classified. And the problem with that is you never know from these intelligence sources, you never know, is that actually, do they have proof? Do they have facts? Or is it just propaganda? Because that's how intelligence services work, right? They lie, but they also have facts, but you never know, because they never tell you how they arrived at that, because that's all classified. So to us, private citizens listening to this podcast, it is not reliable. We cannot rely on that, right? The government might be able to rely on that. They might be told behind closed doors, yeah, this is how we got this information, and then you can say, okay, I believe this. But like the public can never know, never knows. And like I've had problems with journalists, and I hate journalists who just go, yeah, okay, the government says the Russians did it and doesn't question them. And I've also been gotten a lot of criticism in the past, because I always make sure that if I write about this kind of stuff, or if I talk about this kind of stuff, I'm saying, right, they do not have technical attribution. At this point, it's just political propaganda, for lack of a better term. Even if it turns out to be true in the end, right? And that's precisely the point why something like this warning from Biden cannot be a deterrent, because of this attribution problem. Because if you are just attributing these attacks based on political means, this deterrent doesn't work, right? Let's say Russia currently is engaged in a cyberwar campaign against the US, right? And let's say they see this. Did they listen to this? Sorry, I'm just adjusting my microphone. And they listen to this speech by Biden, and then they go, yeah, okay, the Americans seem really pissed, and we should stop this. And it deters them from further attacks, right? Let's say the US next month is attacked by China. Because these attributions are only political, there's no reason why Biden couldn't attribute the attack from China to Russia. Right? So Russia doesn't even, like, that's the downside of kind of like this plausible deniability, or that's like the other side of the coin. They don't win anything if they actually stop the attacks. Because the attribution being political, they could still get blamed for it. And because the press and the public at large just believes this kind of shit, they would believe that, right? Because nobody, when the government says, oh, we were attacked, it was the Russians, because nobody goes, well, like, where's your proof? Put up or shut up. Nobody does that in the mainstream media. People don't even know. They don't understand how attributional cyber attacks work. They just believe that kind of shit. So this cannot be, this theory, if you have this theory that Biden did this to deter this, then you basically don't understand how cyber attacks work and how they attribute it, because and the history of it, because it's just not, it just doesn't make any sense as a deterrent, right? If you have plausible deniability, like, why that wouldn't be a deterrent, right? You could just say it wasn't us. And conversely, the one who's attacked can always say, well, it was you, and they don't need to show any proof. So, yeah. Russia really, in this case, presumably Russia, let's just say it's Russia, just for argument's sake, they have no reason not to attack, especially like if they basically think their attacks are not not detectable anyway, not attributable anyway. They got nothing to lose, right? They might as well attack them. And that is just, that's just one aspect of it. Like, this, all of this reporting on this doesn't take the very complex and very gray area of these cyber attacks into account that we talked about on that previous episode. Right? So some stuff I just touched on earlier. when we're attributing this, when you're blaming people for this, like where are the lines? Like, so if a company based in a certain country, right, is attacked, is that an attack on the company or the country? Like, right? If a Russian energy company attacks a competitor in the US, like is that an economic issue? Is that between those companies? Is that an attack on US sovereignty? And like conversely, right? If who's the attacker, right? If just like criminals or script kiddies attack a company, or like even like, you know, if these all of these ransomware attacks, right? Most of them, I mean, there were other attacks like NotPetya, which were camouflaged as ransomware attacks, and were really state-sponsored attacks probably. But like if we're actually talking a ransomware attack, like if Russian criminals to make money like infiltrate the US healthcare sector and they're trying to extort money, like that's not a state-sponsored attack, right? I mean, maybe the US, maybe the Russian intelligence services, like the internal ones, maybe the FSB knows about these criminals and could shut them down and doesn't because they're only attacking US companies, and it kind of helps Russian foreign policy. But like, you know, turning a blind eye, is that state sponsored? I mean, this is all gray areas, and I understand that lots of journalists don't understand this because this is like technology and it's hard and it's nerdy, but like these are political journalists, right? And they're writing like about other things, right? Those same people write about the Crimean conflict. They wrote about, like, for example, the 2006 war in Lebanon, which has a lot of the same links in the show notes, by the way, Private Citizen of Press. There are lots of these issues at stake there as well, right? I mean, lots of the conflicts that, for example, Israel is involved in is not specifically against states, right? If you look at Hezbollah, right, in Lebanon, is that like, do you consider that a state-sponsored actor? Is that a terrorist group? With the Crimean conflict as well, like, was that Russia, right? Are these local rebels in Ukraine? Is it a civil war? Is it international aggression? So these people reporting on this, these journalists, they must know these issues from, like, let's say IRL conflicts, right? So I don't understand why they don't see that, and they don't see that, like, with what they're calling cyberwar. This is even more complicated and even worse. To sum it up, basically what you have is a situation where a country can just claim they were attacked by another country, and they can basically cherry pick, right? It might have been just some script kiddies that had nothing to do with the government, but they can say, oh, well, they were, you know, the FSB was actually helping them, or they, you know, they had support or whatever. They just make that shit up, right? When you read this kind of stuff in a news article on Reuters, right, on the Associated Press, in the New York Times, in Der Spiegel, on the BBC, in the Guardian, nobody ever puts any, like, not even like hint, like, I'm not even talking proof, not even hints of, like, what actually happened there. Like, who are these attackers? Like, okay, they were, like, sitting in the servers were in Beijing, but, like, why are we sure it was the Russians, right? Like, what is actually the attribution details? Nobody cares about this. It's just the government says they attacked us, and now we can react. And why I'm talking about this on this episode is that was all bad enough when we're talking, we're going to attack them back, and we're going to have the cyber Cold War, right? As Astral calls it. But with Biden saying this now and putting the world on notice, we actually have the threat of a hot war now. We have the threat of a real war because of all these issues. And that is really worrying me. Right? We had, as long as I can remember, I'm like, what am I now? 36, right? can't really remember the Cold War, right? I've of course learned about it in university and stuff in school, but the time I can remember, right, the era after the Cold War, we had kind of a truth, we had a, you know, an understanding in the international community that countries, and especially superpowers like Russia and the US, if they do things, right? We have the UN, we have inspectors, we have the press. If something happens, somebody fires a rocket, if, you know, submarines start turning up inside the waters of other countries, people will realize, and there will be consequences, right? You can't just you can push it, you know, and there's certainly been submarines that submerge somewhere in harbors at night and then, you know, or emerge and submerge again, whatever. You know, we had all these, you know, planes flying over countries. Yes, countries push these boundaries all the time, but like there's an understanding of like what's going on, and that the public understands certain things. They understand, you know, with military actions and with conventional warfare, they understand what leads to what and who is the aggressor here, and they understand that, let's say, if the U.S. government said, you know, we have Russian planes invading our airspace every day, we have Russian submarines at night coming up in Pearl Harbor, or like in in San Diego or whatever, right? If the New York Times writes about this, they go like, yeah, they said this, but where's the proof? Like, we need to see, like, if you're saying, okay, this is a serious situation, this might lead to war, we need to see the proof. And the public and journalists are much more savvy at understanding, like, you know, what this proof would be and what would be fake, whatever, as there are with cyber, where nobody understands really what's happening. It's all like ones and zeros, and it's all like black magic and voodoo, and it's like really weird. And that is what is dangerous to me, because people don't understand this, and this leads to the ability of governments just to be able to put out propaganda unchecked, right? Where we can just say, oh, it was the Russians. Okay, it was the Russians. We all believe it. And that's a reason to go to war. That is really worrying me. I don't know. Yeah, that's this. I saw this. I saw this speech from Biden when I came home from holiday, and I was like, wow, this is really, really, really bad. And I don't think people understood generally how bad this is. But I'm one thing I agree with Biden. It's gonna get really interesting in the next 10 years. It's gonna. I think we are at a crossroads where we will see if, like, you know, what happens. Like, do cooler heads prevail? Right? Do people who know actually what they're talking about prevail and go like, okay, this is a hacker attack, but it's bad. It's people's information out there. It has consequences, but it's certainly not an attack with weapons and, you know, tanks and assault rifles and people being killed. Or will we have? Will people not like you know, what worries me personally is like, I'm getting old, right? I'm getting old, and I'm looking at like young kids, and then they're growing up with phones and tablets, right? They have tablets when they're like 4 or whatever. They grow up with the internet, with Facebook, with social media, and I think they're less savvy because I'm old, and I think everything is getting worse. I think they're less savvy than we were back in the day, and I don't think they just use technology and they don't care how it works. Which in itself, you know, isn't bad. So certainly, you know, when I grew, I don't know how a car engine works, right? And there were people 30 years earlier, a lot more people knew how the car engine worked and could repair it, right? And you can say, like, from an old curmudgeon, you kind of, it's bad that is, but it's not really like that bad for society as a whole. But I feel that with digital technology, it's a bit different because it runs all our lives. And if people don't understand how it works, it's going to become very dangerous. Not only like in this case, but when we're talking about privacy and stuff. If people just assume that there's cameras everywhere, or another example, there seems to be like this kind of understanding with younger people that if you do technology, like you put all the data in the cloud. Like, why wouldn't you? Right? It has to be in the cloud. To do anything with it, it has to be in the cloud, which is frankly dumb, right? Which is, the reason everything's put in the cloud is not a technological reason, it's purely a business reason. Because companies want to have control of data, and they want to have, computing be cheaper and stuff like that. It's not a you can't do this calculation, you can't run this algorithm on a local computer, you have to have the cloud. But people just assume that. They just, these days it's just like, it's marketing, it's propaganda, that's PR, that's been hammered down everybody's throats, where, of course it's going to be, the data's going to be in the cloud, right? And then people don't think about, like, so when my parents got like their new stove and it has like Wi-Fi, and if you turn that on, it's all integrated with cloud and with the cloud storage, whatever. You can't even turn that off. And you like anything you do, like the maker of the stove knows like what you like. I don't even know what fucking function that thing has, why it has Wi-Fi. I don't even fucking care. But like they know everything by default, right? Or you install like a camera on your door so you can see who's at your door, right? Why does that have to go to the cloud? Makes no fucking sense. Like, it's a camera and I have a phone. Why isn't the camera sending the picture directly to my phone, end-to-end encrypted? Why does anybody else need to know who's in front of my door? Right? Makes no sense. So that I can say, hey, Alexa, who's at the door? Like, fuck that. Is that like the downside is so much bigger? But I feel like I'm like, you're probably listening to this and you're more in my camp, because why wouldn't you be listening to this podcast? But I feel like we're getting like severely outnumbered out there. And that's worrying me. I don't know what we can do. I don't have kids, so I don't really want to have kids. But like, if you have kids, please raise some good nerds. Teach them how this stuff works, right? And teach them that technology doesn't have to be always on, always connected, that other people don't always have to know what you're doing, that there are open source operating system that works. I think that's the only defense. I don't know. I just hope cooler heads prevail. There have certainly been high points in history where this has happened. There's this famous case with that Russian military guy where basically the system, something happened and the system detected a US nuclear launch, and right, they would have launched nukes. It was a mistake. Nothing happened, but they would have launched nukes and started the World War. And there was this guy who was in the chain of command whose job was to push the button, right? And he was not allowed not to push the button. But nonetheless, he was like, this is a technical error. I'm not going to push the button. And he basically saved the planet. And that has happened like all over history. So I hope this is. I hope that's what's happening with this cyber stuff. But it's very worrying. And it's not so much worrying to me that a U.S. president goes like, completely high jingo and goes like, war. As Jonathan points out, it's very on brand. But in the past, certainly the media was more critical of this. If not the US media, then media outside of the US was. And it seems to be lost in this red versus blue, conservative versus progressive. The thing we always talk about on the show as well, in this culture war, whatever, in this nobody's listening to anybody, you already get, you haven't even said 3 words, you already get put in like a box, right? You're you're a conspiracy theorist. You're I don't know. In German right now, it's like Querdenker, right? You're weird because you're against vaccination, whatever. You think immunity passports are shit, so you're one of these guys. You get put in these boxes, and that destroys everything. This destroys discourse, right? And that destroys, in this case, for example, in the media, a good analysis of this. Because just imagine Trump had said this. Just imagine Trump would have given a speech, they're hacking us and we're going to retaliate with war. The New York Times would have been all over that. There would have been articles why it's a bad idea to retaliate on like a hacker attack with actual war. Because Trump is insane and he wants to start wars and he's a warmonger. But Joe Biden says something like this, there's no pushback from the media at all on this. And that is just like, it can't go. But something has to give. Anyway, I'm just turning around. Let's hope cooler heads prevail. I'll definitely keep an eye on this. Cyberwar is a topic we're going to be talking about a lot in the future. I feel at some point one's probably going to break out, the mythical Cyberwar, and then we're going to talk about it. But before we do that, I got some interesting feedback from producers, listeners to the show, viewers on Twitch maybe, who had something to say about things I said in the past. And some of this is again about YouTube, which is very interesting. So let's get into that. So you might remember that episode where I talked about the vaccination passports and the technology and everything when they launched it in Germany, and that got pulled off YouTube. And ever since then, I'm like in this, links in the show notes, by the way, Private Citizen of Press. And that was episode 75, where we talked about this, why I think this is a problem. Not only because that I was affected. I mean, that wasn't really the point. Not really that many people watch the show on YouTube. I just upload the recording from Twitch there. But luckily, most people listen to this as a podcast, which is much more censorship resistant. But like it's an important topic because I think it's a freedom of the press issue in Germany, right? My point was I'm a journalist, right? This is journalistic work. I don't work for a big publishing company, but what I'm doing here is journalism. And YouTube, generally people say, yeah, well, it's a private company. They can do what they want. No, they can't, because we have a constitution in Germany and there are protections in there that apply to everybody, right? That apply that what YouTube was doing in my case, I thought was discrimination and censorship. And I understand the German, for lack of a better term, constitution, the Grundgesetz, as in that is not allowed if you're producing journalistic works. Now, it turns out I wasn't the only one thinking this way. So Galteran, who supports the show a lot, sent me on our Discord, sent me a link to a story. It's a German story, but I'm going to paraphrase this. So there's a German YouTuber called Gunnar Kaiser. He runs a thing called Kaiser TV. He's a teacher from Cologne, who's also now a novelist. And he, from the beginning, he ran that YouTube channel, and he's like, this YouTube channel originally was a lot about like philosophic thinking, right? About how we lead our lives and stuff like that. And from the beginning, he's been a pretty outspoken critic of the, those anti-SARS-CoV-2 measures that we have everywhere that I talked about on the show. He is a lot less ranty than me. He's a very, very soft-spoken and intelligent person, I feel. But of course, because he was critical, he was already pretty immediately under fire, called a conspiracy theorist, Querdenker, all this kind of stuff. Certainly, he has talked at some of these rallies in the past. The bad Querdenker rallies where all the bad people are. We've also talked about this on the show before.
But and because of that, he's then also been a critic of cancel culture, because he was, to some degree targeted by these kind of things. Now, so that's just the background on his channel. Now, YouTube has kicked him off the partner program, which means he can't make any money anymore. And they didn't really tell him why. They only said that in the past he violated the terms of the partner program, but didn't tell him why. Kind of like, YouTube cut my video off, just unpublished it from the platform, saying I was espousing information that was in contradiction to like guidance by the WHO and my local health authority. To which I replied, no, I wasn't. Please show me where. And YouTube has this habit of just going, no, you violated some terms. You're gone now. Be gone. And they don't even tell you like where. Like where specifically in my video? What did I do? Right? And that is like bad. Like even if you're of the opinion that this is a public company, they could do on their platform whatever they want. Yeah, sure. So if you're in a restaurant and you behave badly, the guy who runs the restaurant can say you're out of here. You're never allowed to come in my restaurant again, right? Which is accepted in society. But if restaurant owners would do that without actually telling you a reason, right? They would just go, I don't like your nose. I don't like your glasses. I don't like your haircut. You're not allowed in here anymore. If they would do that, or if they wouldn't, you're not allowed in here, go out, and you go, why? No, I'm not telling you, you violated some terms, go out. Like, that would be an outcry. That would be seen probably as discrimination, right? Especially if the person was part of some minority, let's say they're black or whatever, or like, let's say they're Asian, and somebody would just go, you're not allowed in my restaurant, go out, right? People generally would side on the discrimination angle. They wouldn't go, well, it's his right, he can do that, it's his restaurant. And I kind of feel like the same with what YouTube's doing here. Anyway, so Kaiser makes a lot of money on YouTube, so he was like, no, fuck you, I'm not gonna take this lying down. So he got a lawyer. He lawyered up, and then he got the lawyer to actually get an injunction at like the federal state court in Cologne, the Landgericht, and he actually got an injunction against YouTube, which is a precedent. As far as I can tell, something like this, and I'm not a lawyer, obviously, not an expert on legal matters, but as far as I understand, nothing like this has ever happened before. So basically, the court in Cologne said, YouTube, you can't cut somebody off. You can't just demonetize them and say they violated some terms without telling the person what terms they violated. And when you do that, you've got 7 days. And you have to do this within 7 days now. And an injunction, of course, means that meanwhile they have to restore the video. So they now have, I think this was over the week ago. So I haven't found any new coverage on this. So if you find anything more on this, please let me know. PrivateCitizen.press, there's contact information on there. I'm interested in all these topics around YouTube, and let me know. But like, he got that injunction, and if Google doesn't comply, they have to actually pay fees, I think. They're liable to pay fees. And what I found very interesting is that so Kaiser's lawyer, a guy called Joachim Steinhöfel, who apparently has defended quite a lot of people who had this happen in the past, says this is an important precedent for creators. And he says that basically he thinks this is the word is not coming to me. Let me drink some coffee. What's the word I'm looking for? Discrimination. Discrimination is the word I'm looking for. So this lawyer says it's basically discrimination. He's kind of of the same opinion of me. He says YouTube has a neutrality, has to have a certain level of neutrality when it comes to journalistic works. because of the Constitution and the press freedom that is guaranteed there. And he basically says, to be a journalist, you can just be like a vlogger, you can be a blogger, you can be a guy like me, a freelance guy who's working from home, who isn't part of a big established publishing company. That the German Constitution and German law doesn't. I mean, there've been actually been quite a lot of cases in the past where it was explicitly stated by courts that if you're a blogger, you can be a journalist, right? There are some rule, not really rules, but like some baselines you have to follow, right? I've talked about the press codex in the past, and you basically have to act like a journalist. You can't just like espouse opinion or whatever. Like you have to if you're just a guy in your underpants at home, and you're basically doing what a professional journalist does in the Spiegel newsroom, then you're a journalist, right? If you do the same kind of work, and you can write opinion articles, right? Because they do that at the Spiegel. Just like it has to have a certain form and stuff like that. Then you're a journalist. That's what German courts think, and that means that you're doing journalistic work. That means press protection under the Constitution applies to you, which I think is great. And I think it's great that Kaiser got this injunction. Jonathan says that court injunction sounds crazy. That would mean that Google needs to work for their money. Yeah, maybe they need to actually think about things now, right? And they just can't do like, oh, we're king of the hill. We run this place. We can do whatever we want. I think this is pretty great. Anyway, I'm going to keep an eye on this story. I had another feedback and an email from Martin, who I read out some feedback from him in episode 79, and I replied to it. And now he's replying to me. So Martin says, I agree with you to a point about journalistic standards and his guilt of contempt in court. We were talking about this Scottish guy who got, I think, arrested for blogging, and I said he was held in contempt of court and stuff like that. He named some people he shouldn't have named, but the situation is a lot more complicated than the average sexual assault case. Sorry, my voice is going. I hate pollen, allergies. This is because the accusers were also members of the government who had been actively involved in the legislative process regarding sexual misconduct. The process as the Scottish government implemented was itself the subject of a previous lawsuit and found to be illegal. In effect, these people had twin roles in the case, but could not be named in either context, meaning the reasons Alex Salmond was cleared of all charges cannot be fully revealed. Now, I have to say, I know nothing about this. I'm not very up in Scottish politics. So it sounds like I've had exchanged some emails with Martin in the past. He seems to be very pro-Scottish independence, so take that with a grain of salt. I have no reason to not believe him when he says these things, but I think, like everybody, he's biased to a certain degree. Just keep that in mind. That's not a knock on him. We're all biased. I just wanted to let people know that I have his viewpoint and I don't have the opposing viewpoint, because I don't have feedback from somebody who's pro United Kingdom or whatever and pro Scotland remaining in the Union. So I don't know. Just take that under advisement. One of these people is on record as stating in a WhatsApp group message, quote, I have a plan by which we can remain anonymous. This is where you can see that Martin definitely has an axe to grind here. He says, this was a conspiracy to completely destroy the reputation of Alex Salmond and prevent his return to politics. I don't even know where Alex Salmond is, so I have no idea. I've no dog in this race. And it has been successful. I know the identity of the person that made that statement on WhatsApp and have a photograph of them at a meeting I attended, but 2 people have already been given prison sentences for naming them, so I won't do so now. I did not learn the identity from what Craig Murray wrote, by the way. So Craig Murray is the guy who is is going to prison now because he wrote about this. I think. Or he was definitely held in contempt of court. There's also a shocking double standard to the sentence handed down to Craig Murray. He was by no means the only journalist to reveal information that could lead to the identity of the accusers. Several others revealed far more, most notably one Danny Garavelli and a court reporter James Dolman, who actually outright named someone. These people were not even investigated, far less charged. It's my belief the reason for that is that they were on the, quote, right side and Craig Murray isn't. Now, whatever side of this argument you're on, I don't know. But I feel like the last paragraph kind of rings true. If what Martin says there is true, then that is, of course, I completely agree with you. That is a double standard. That is horrible. Like, if I was basically arguing from a journalist's perspective and the things you do and don't do, right? You don't name, in my view, I come from Germany. We have different views of this, certainly, than the US and the UK. But, we don't name suspects. We often don't even name convicted felons because the idea is that they should be able to reintegrate into society, and you're kind of harming that. So there's some ground rules, and I was just advocating for these ground rules. I think they're there for a reason, and there's a reason why journalism isn't like WikiLeaks, where you just put information out there. You kind of think about what you're doing before you do that. But certainly an argument back and forth, but I was just arguing for that. But I completely agree with you, Martin, that has to be enforced on all journalists. So if somebody's held in contempt of court because he violated that, then anybody else who did that should be too. And I know nothing about this case. I know very little about the media in Scotland. But when you say that you believe that this is because this one guy was on the right side on the argument and the other guys weren't, then I completely believe you. Because I've seen this in places where I know about the media and I know where things are happening. I've seen the same thing. That is certainly something that happens. Yeah. So I kind of do agree with that, even though I don't know that much about the topic. But, maybe something we'll talk about on the show in the future. We'll see. Anyway, I welcome all your feedback. I think this is very helpful. Go to privatecitizen.press. There's a contact link. There's many ways to contact me, including anonymous ways. And if you have ideas, I could talk about if I talk about something and you have a local angle, right? You're in Scotland, you're like, right, Cyberwar, this is what's happening here. Or you're in the Netherlands, or you're in China, or you're in Russia, and you're like, they keep blaming us, and it's really not true here. This is the Russian perspective. Please let me know. Either quotable, so I can quote you, or anonymous if you want. I keep your name out of it if you want. I'm one of the journalists. I adhere to these standards, and I won't name you if you don't want to be named. Source protection is pretty much the highest ideal I have. Also, if you know somebody who's willing to come on the show, I've done interviews in the past. I've did kind of discussion episodes, please let me know. Or if you have a topic you want covered, Private Citizen Press, go to the contact form, let me know. And with that, it's starting to be time to wrap up the show. Which is about time, because I'm slowly running out of coffee, which is not a good thing, because I have to drink copious amounts of coffee because these bloody allergies are just putting a damper on my whole day. It's horrible. It's just I'm really lethargic. Bloody grass, burn it all down, destroy it all, nuke it from orbit. Fucking nature. Anyway, I have to thank everybody who's keeping the show on the air. As I mentioned before, I'm just a guy in my underpants doing this. I might be doing the same work as the Spiegel, but I'm doing it from home, and I'm largely not getting paid. So I would like to thank everybody who's helped out. And just very quickly, you can do this. This show is produced under the value for value model, which means you get it for free, and then you can decide the value. And there's several ways of getting the value back for me. To me, you can go to Patreon, become a subscriber. You can send me one-off donations via PayPal. producers@fab.industries is the email address. All of this in the show notes, privatecitizen.press. And you can also, subscribe to my Twitch channel, which also helps out. So I would like to thank all the people who did this. So for this episode, I'm thankful to Georges, Steve Hose, Butterbeans, Jonathan M. Heathy, Michael Mullen Jensen, Dave, 1i11G, Michael Small, Jackie Plage, Philipp Klostermann, Vlad, Jaroslav Lichtblau, IKN, Kai Sears, Bennett Piata, Fadi Mansour, Joe Pose, Dirk Didi, Tobias, Mode 7, David Potter, Sandman616, Mika, Martin, Rodane the Insane, Rizal, Avis, Mr. Ramish, Dave Umrish, Drive Zero, Ricky M, Barry Williams, Jonathan Edwards, Cam, Philip, Captain Eckhead, RJ Tracy, D, Rick Bragg, Robert Forster, Super User, and No Reply. And I'm also thankful to all my Twitch subscribers who are Mike the Dane, Flash Gordo, Indie Gamiacs, Sandman616, Mode 7's Unavailable, Epochski, El Terrestris Jim, Redeemer F, Galtaran, Bacon the Pork, and Jonathan MH_com. Good friend Jonathan. I would also like to thank Bytemark. They provide me pro bono with the service I use for the audio files, so the bandwidth, which if I had to pay that, the show would be off the air really quickly. So thanks to those. Thanks to Bytemark. As Bytemark.co.uk is a hosting company from the UK. So thanks to Bytemark. Thanks to everybody who helped out putting the show on the air. And with that, I think I'm pretty much out of here because I still have some work to do today. Also, I'm very... this show just made me aggressive. I don't know. Just Joe Biden fucking just makes me aggressive. Once I'm done with this, I'm gonna take my shirt off. I can't do this on camera, of course, because that would be Twitch TOS violation. But I'll take my shirt off, put some MMA gloves on, and start kicking my kickboxing sandbag in the corner of the room for about an hour. And after that, I usually feel better. And I'll see you next week. I hope. Well, the plan is I'll be back on Wednesday. As I said before, if that. I just played the music very. That was too early. Come on. Anyway, I'll be back. I'll hope on Wednesday. If I'm not, then the horribly bad side effects hit me, and I'll take a few days to recover and I'll be back. Until then, aim to misbehave. And I'm going to play us out with a song you just heard the very beginning of there. It's a nice little jazz tune called Cliff by Hara Noda. So see you soon, I hope. Biontech willing. go. That's it for the show. As I said, I'm gonna go. Gonna leave you now. Gonna do a bit of exercise, edit the show, and I'll see you tomorrow at 12 when I return to The Witcher 2, which has been a while, which means I have to learn the controls again, which will be fun. But yes, I'm going to continue The Witcher. I'm going to continue to have a stream schedule, fab.industry/stream is where you can look that up. Anyway, I'm going to rate you over to Deadly Slop now because it's during the day. He's playing Tarkov. I'm going to watch that on the site as well, probably while I do exercise. And I hope to see you soon. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week if I'm not dead. Until then, have a good one. Thanks for watching.